Welcome back. What you are about to hear is not just another geopolitical update. It is the unfolding of a moment that historians will one day describe as the precise second when global order fractured under the weight of its own contradictions. There are no safe assumptions left. There are no stabilizing forces quietly working behind the scenes. What we are witnessing tonight is something far more volatile, far more dangerous, and far more immediate than anything most of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes. The reality now confronting the world is stark and unavoidable. Power is slipping, control is eroding, and at the center of it all stands a leadership structure that appears increasingly unable to contain what it once dominated with ease. Trump loses all control as the war deadline arrives, and what follows may redefine the limits of American influence for decades to come. 12 hours ago, a series of intelligence briefings circulated among senior officials revealed a cascade of failures that had been quietly accumulating over the past several weeks. These were not minor miscalculations or routine strategic errors. These were systemic breakdowns in communication, coordination, and command authority at the highest levels. Multiple defense channels reported conflicting directives. Strategic assets were repositioned without unified authorization. Key alliances, once considered unshakable, began showing signs of hesitation, even resistance. And within that confusion, something critical slipped through the cracks. The deadline, long discussed, quietly negotiated, and publicly downplayed, has now arrived. And with it, the consequences of indecision have begun to surface in ways that can no longer be contained or dismissed. What makes this moment particularly dangerous is not simply the existence of a deadline. Deadlines in international conflict are not unusual. They are often used as leverage, as pressure points, as tools to force negotiation or concession. But this deadline is different. This deadline was tied to a series of escalating commitments that now appear to have outpaced the ability of leadership to manage them. Military posturing has reached a point of no return. Diplomatic backchannels, once relied upon to diffuse tension, have gone silent. And perhaps most alarming of all, there is growing evidence that key adversaries have recognized this moment of vulnerability and are actively moving to exploit it. In the past, moments like this would be met with a decisive response, a show of strength, a clear, unified message that reasserts control and stabilizes the situation. But tonight, that response is nowhere to be found. Instead, what we are seeing is fragmentation, mixed signals, a leadership vacuum that is being filled not by strategy but by urgency and reaction. Reports indicate that within the administration itself there is significant disagreement over how to proceed. Some advisors are pushing for immediate escalation, arguing that any sign of hesitation will only embolden opposition forces. Others are warning that escalation without a coherent plan could trigger a chain reaction that spirals far beyond anyone's control. And in the middle of this internal conflict stands Trump, a figure who once thrived on projecting dominance and certainty, now facing a situation that demands precision, discipline, and coordination, qualities that appear increasingly strained under the current pressure. The phrase "loses all control" is not being used lightly here. It is not hyperbole. It reflects a growing consensus among observers and insiders alike that the mechanisms of control, those invisible systems that allow a leader to direct, influence, and contain events, are breaking down in real time. Control in this context is not about personal authority or public image. It is about the ability to align military, diplomatic, and strategic actions toward a coherent objective. And that alignment is no longer holding. One of the most telling indicators of this breakdown is the shifting posture of international allies. Traditionally, moments of heightened tension would see a tightening of alliances, a reaffirmation of shared goals, and a coordinated approach to managing the crisis. But what we are seeing instead is hesitation, quiet distancing, subtle signals that key partners are reassessing their positions. Some have begun issuing carefully worded statements, emphasizing the need for restraint and de-escalation, language that, while diplomatic, suggests a lack of confidence in the current trajectory. Others have remained conspicuously silent, choosing to observe rather than commit. This fragmentation among allies further complicates an already unstable situation. Without a unified front, the ability to project strength is significantly diminished, and adversaries are watching closely. They are analyzing every signal, every hesitation, every inconsistency, and they are adjusting their strategies accordingly. Intelligence reports indicate increased activity across multiple fronts, movements that suggest preparation, not for negotiation, but for action. The war deadline that has now arrived was meant to force a resolution. Instead, it has exposed a lack of readiness that could have far-reaching consequences. Domestically, the situation is no less concerning. The flow of information to the public has been inconsistent, at times contradictory. Official statements have attempted to project calm and control, but those statements are increasingly at odds with the reports emerging from within the system. This disconnect is fueling uncertainty, not just among citizens, but within the broader political landscape. Lawmakers are demanding clarity. Military officials are seeking clear directives, and the absence of a consistent authoritative response is creating a vacuum that is being filled by speculation and concern. In moments like this, perception matters almost as much as reality. And the perception that control is slipping can have a cascading effect. It can influence markets, it can shape public behavior, it can alter the calculations of both allies and adversaries. And right now, that perception is becoming increasingly difficult to counter. The image of a leader firmly in command, guiding the nation through a crisis with confidence and precision, is being replaced by something far more uncertain. Something that suggests a system under strain, struggling to keep pace with the demands being placed upon it. The question now is not simply what happens next, but how quickly events will move. War deadlines, once reached, do not pause for reconsideration. They trigger sequences. They activate plans. They set into motion dynamics that are difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. And with control already compromised, the margin for error is dangerously thin. There are still paths that could lead to stabilization. Diplomatic interventions, though limited, are not entirely off the table. Strategic recalibrations, if executed swiftly and effectively, could help restore a degree of control. But those options require a level of coordination and decisiveness that has so far been lacking. And time is not on anyone's side. Every passing hour increases the likelihood that events will outpace the ability to manage them. This is the reality of the moment we are in. A convergence of deadlines, decisions, and dynamics that have reached a critical threshold. Trump loses all control as the war deadline arrives, and the consequences of that loss are beginning to unfold in ways that are both immediate and unpredictable. What happens next will not be determined by a single decision or a single action. It will be shaped by a complex interplay of forces, each moving with its own momentum, each responding to signals that are becoming increasingly difficult to interpret. The world is watching, not with the distant curiosity of observers, but with the focused attention of participants who understand that the outcome of this moment will have direct implications for their own stability and security. There are no guarantees, no clear roadmaps, only a rapidly evolving situation that demands clarity, control, and leadership at a time when all three appear to be under significant strain. And that is where we stand tonight, at the edge of a moment that could redefine not just the balance of power, but the very mechanisms through which that power is exercised.